Welcome in to the Fun Astrology and Merriman Market Analyst Saturday Financial Podcast. I'm Thomas Miller. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be reading the Merriman Market Analyst newsletter at MMAcycles.com, freely published every weekend, and this is for the week beginning January 27th. Before we look ahead, let's look back. An article to get us started from CNBC on Friday. The S&P 500 closed lower after hitting new records on Friday as investors took some profits to end a solid week centered on President Donald Trump's return to the White House. Despite Friday's retreat, excitement toward Trump's pro-business policies has largely pushed risk assets higher this week as investors focused on his inauguration. Traders were also relieved that there have been only threats on the tariff front from Trump instead of formal action. End quote. Now Ray's comments. The Trump bump continued to propel global stock indices higher last week. S&P futures made a new all-time high, but the Dow Jones Industrial Average and NASDAQ fell slightly short. It was also a positive but bumpy ride up for Bitcoin, which actually made a new all-time high last Monday. Gold is also closing in on its all-time high, whereas the rally in silver was even bumpier and fell short of making even a high for the current primary cycle. Thus, many markets are looking very positive as the second Trump era gets underway. Still, there are developing signs of intermarket bearish divergence as we approach next week's new moon and powerful Uranus station. And now the short-term geocosmics. A difference between intelligence and stupidity is that intelligence has its limits. It's from Eric Nadler in the Wall Street Journal on January 23rd. Ray says the week ahead begins with Mercury ingressing into Aquarius on Monday, Tuesday, January 27th and 28th. A new moon will occur in Aquarius on Wednesday, January 29th, followed by Uranus turning direct the next day, January 30th. Uranus rules Aquarius and is considered the higher octave of Mercury, intellect. So the themes of both the planet Uranus and the sign of Aquarius will be highlighted. What should we expect? Nothing. That's because Uranus and Aquarius pertain to the unexpected, or surprises that no one expects. Perhaps it's a shock, or symbolic, or literal earthquake. On one hand, it can signify brilliance, inspiration, and original thought. On the other hand, these cosmic entities can signify a lack of common sense, as the intent is often to disrupt rather than make things work better. Both Aquarius and Uranus rule technology, innovation, and space exploration, so it should not be a surprise to see increased attention on the NASDAQ, which has been on a tear recently. Silver, however, is vulnerable to sudden declines when the sun and moon are both in signs like Aquarius. There will be 3 air-air solar-lunar combinations between now and February 17th. This is the first. Whenever Uranus is highlighted, we must also be aware of either a sudden reversal or a breakout to new multi-month highs or lows in markets. The stock market, Bitcoin, and gold come to mind as they are near their yearly highs again. In the case of stocks, they are also in the early stages of their primary cycle. Markets in the early stages of cycles are usually bullish, too. Markets in their later cycles are more prone to sudden declines. Bitcoin is entering the later stages of its primary cycle, where its low is due in about 6 to 12 weeks. The high will likely occur any time before then. On top of these factors, we also note that the Sun will form a harmonious trine to Jupiter in Gemini on January 30th, followed by Jupiter turning direct on February 4th. Jupiter is the optimist and likes things large and positive. This highlights the possibility of seeing new all-time highs in equity markets. The only cosmic drawback is the 1/8 semi-square cycle of Saturn and Pluto on Sunday, January 26th. This may represent the resistance to the changes in power structures taking place in world leadership, as well as the severe and life-threatening weather conditions currently unfolding. Extreme cold plus damaging wildfires in the United States. With Pluto, the fear of violence and/or retribution may also exist by those who felt mistreated. Now some longer-term thoughts. A quote from The Economist on January 21st. Maybe you are in the habit of applying a hefty discount to claims by Donald Trump. No one could blame you. But he really does have the chance to lead America into the golden age he proclaimed in his second inaugural address. Historic circumstances, political dynamics, and his own audacity could enable him to achieve the legacy he wants as a peacemaker and unifier. Mr. Trump has battled for 10 years against anyone he perceived to have crossed him. His most formidable adversary, still standing, is probably himself. And this from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Democracy. Definition. A form of government in which people elect representatives to make decisions, policies, laws, etc., according to the law. And B, political, social, or economic equality, the absence of hereditary or arbitrary class distinctions or privileges. End quote. Ray's thoughts. It was an exciting week highlighted by the U.S. presidential inauguration ceremony on Monday, January 20th. As noted above, this kicked off strong rallies in many financial and commodity markets. However, it was also disappointing to me to see both the outgoing and incoming presidents' apparent lack of sincerity regarding their campaign promises of valuing the principles of democracy. Both issued pardons to several people that very day and recently who had broken laws and were close associates or even family members. Thus, the inauguration was both a day of excitement and disappointment for many who value democracy and truthfulness, including this writer. This is the type of conundrum represented by the approaching Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries 2025 and 26 that will either make or break the dream of a golden age for the United States. If you want a golden age under Saturn-Neptune, you have to be a person of your word. Deception is the downside of this aspect. While I'm editorializing, let me take the opportunity to agree with those who insist that President Trump ran a brilliant campaign. I would also agree he is a brilliant deal-maker and has the gift for raising revenues, personally and for the nation. However, as gifted as he is at making money, little in his personal history indicates that he is gifted at managing money. To think that he is angling for a voice or influence on decisions that the Federal Reserve Board or even the U.S. Treasury Secretary should not give anyone comfort. This is especially true given the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions of 2025 and 26, making a T-square to the Federal Reserve Board's natal Sun-Pluto opposition of power struggles, and square to the U.S. natal Venus-Jupiter conjunction. The latter is one of the classical bankruptcy aspects, if not attended to with a talent to control the expense side of the ledger. Yet we are now entering the powerful Aries Vortex this spring, Saturn and Neptune crossing from Pisces to Aries, which is also the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto. This unusual cosmic alignment offers the possibility of the very golden age that President Trump promises. It will be turbulent, at least at first, and with all of the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, retrograde back-to-back, between December 7, 2024 and April 12, 2025. Chaos is probably the dominant theme of this period, of such sweeping changes being enacted. New and bold initiatives will begin, executive orders will be pronounced, and promises will be made. However, the implementation will likely be fraught with confusion and misjudgments initially. This could lead to volatility in world stock markets. How long this lasts depends on the flexibility of decision-makers to recognize a bad trade or decision as quickly as possible and make revisions. This time band of uncertainty and volatility might end by spring, or it could last into 2027. The planets are not entirely casual, but they do correspond to the nature of choices before us, and those choices will determine the outcome. With Saturn-Neptune entering Aries, i.e. the Aries Vortex, it is imperative to be truthful, honest, and transparent, and consciously avoid behaviors that may be construed as corrupt, deceptive, or undemocratic if you claim to run a democratic enterprise. If our leaders can do that, then yes, the United States, and other nations of the world too, can be on the verge of a new golden age, one that we have been anticipating over the past 3 years as a techno renaissance. And that concludes this week's newsletter, the first one, by the way, written from Ray's new home base, at least for now, of Miami, Florida. As we had talked about in the interview that he and I did, which if you have not caught, I would highly suggest go back and listen to. That was released on the channel and YouTube back in late December. And then also, all of this is elaborated and way extruded in the Forecast 2025 book, now on audio. You can get it really easily. Just go to hightimelinebooks.com, and it's right at the top. Link over to Ray's website from there. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great weekend. We have a full week ahead, as you just heard, so we'll see you back on Monday. Thanks for listening.